Good afternoon. Welcome to Every Child an Author using Book Creator. This will be our final session in our Summer Learning Blitz, and we're so glad that you could join us today. I am honored to be here today with Judy Bowling, Instructional Technology Consultant for Wayne Risa. And really that title doesn't give her all that's due because she's my go-to for all things Google and technology. So she's an amazing resource to reach out to. Also, Dr. Laura Gabrion is here manning the chat for us, and she specializes in secondary education and has been teaching online for many years. So she's a great resource for anything digital, and you can just reach out to her as well. And I'm Michelle Wagner, a literacy consultant for Wayne Risa. Just a few things as we get started. This is a webinar version of Zoom. So we have the chat function like always, and this will be a way to communicate with not just the panelists, but also with anyone in the session. So if you change your settings to all participants, everyone will be able to see that. And then Laura will be manning the question and answers. So if you have any questions you would like raised, please go ahead and put them in there and she'll make sure that she lists those for us. Again, you'll want to change your setting to all panelists and attendees just so that we can all see what you have to say. And we would like to invite you to share your ideas throughout this session. When we started this series, we really thought a lot about what essential practices in remote settings look like. And back at the very beginning of August, we didn't have a great idea of what September would look like for many of us. We were unsure whether that would be remote or face-to-face. And I think that even now, many of us are uncertain what the future holds. But what we do know is that regardless of whether or not we are face-to-face or we are virtual, if we focus on those instructional practices that really are research shown to make a difference in students' educational progress, we're doing the right thing for kids. So when we think about those literacy essentials, it's something that we want to ensure that every child in every classroom every day has access to. And then they fit right there in that tier 1 instruction. So we want to make sure that every child is exposed to these. And then of course, those tier 2 and tier 3 kiddos, they get an extra dose of it. These are good practices for all kids. The first essential we want to focus on today is this idea of deliberate, research-informed efforts to foster literacy, motivation, and engagement within and across lessons. Basically, we want to ensure that kids like and want to read and write. And Judy's going to spend quite some time today sharing with us a tool that will help us do that, will help us foster engagement by really helping ensure that students see themselves as writers. We're also going to make sure that students have daily time to engage in writing and that they can spend time in the whole writing process and that they're able to not only write themselves, but engage with other models of writing that will help them become better writers. When we think about 2020, we all have a story to tell. I don't think it's the story that any of us planned on telling or that any of us hope to tell, but it's certainly a story. And we want to ensure that our students have the voice and the ability to share those stories so that they can remember and chronicle all that they have been through and all that they have learned during this year. Because in the end, what we want to make sure that we're doing is thinking about how we can generate excitement about reading and writing for our students. And so with that, I'm going to throw it over to Judy.
Thanks, Michelle. As Michelle said, we are going to jump into a tool that will allow us to give students the opportunity to write and be authors and to show their creativity along the way as well. We know that we are always led by the learning first, tool second. We also know that there are lots of tools that are out there. And so as we jump into some of the basic features of Book Creator, some of you might be initially thinking, you know, why Book Creator and not Google Docs or Google Slides or some other resource that might be out there? And the main reason why I think that this is a great tool for kids is because at the end, it actually looks like an ebook. It feels like an ebook. You can turn the pages like a book. And so it feels a little more authentic to our students for it being a true book. It has endless possibilities. It's an open-ended creation tool, which is one of the things that I find endearing about this tool because it is a blank slate. The possibilities are endless. It is a tool that can be used K-12, and it can be used to incorporate lots of different multimedia elements. We can have the book read to the student. It can include a variety of things. And so what we're gonna do throughout the next short time together is we're gonna go into the basics of the tool, and then we'll take a look at how you might use that with your students and some templates at the very end. So just to get started, Book Creator is free for everyone, and there is a paid version, and I want to just preference the difference between the two. From a functionality standpoint, they are identical. You are not getting any less from the free version than the paid version. The main difference between the two is that with the paid version, you have the ability to do some real-time collaboration, and you can get some additional books in your library. But the free version is just fine, and that's where we're going to be working from today. And I just wanted to mention that because that would be the only difference. And so we're going to be using Chrome today. It is a software that runs on different browsers, Chrome, Safari, and Edge. And it also is an iPad app, which actually this did start as an app before it moved online. So we're going to be using it through Chrome, and you can have your students logging on with either their Google account, if they have an Office 365, Clever, or you can set it up so that kids just use a QR code without that email connection. So with that, just to remind and sort of set the groundwork for why we're doing what we're doing, is that we are all authors. And as Michelle alluded to a moment ago, you know, we all have a story certainly to share from 2020. It's the year that keeps on giving. And we want to harness technology to have the opportunity to share our stories. And there are a myriad of reasons why we might have our students writing. But at the end of the day, we want them to have a wide variety of text for a wide variety of purposes. And so, again, we're going to start out with a very basic example, but the possibilities are endless. And we want our kids, again, to be authors and to be writing for an authentic purpose. Rushton Blake, I think, said it best, that when kids have a global audience, they want their work to be good. And when the audience is just the teacher, they want their audience to be good enough. So one of the things that Book Creator does so well is that it allows us to share the work of our students with anybody around the world. And those that receive the link for their book, it requires no additional software. So it's very simple. But again, when our kids do write for a larger audience, they have an authentic purpose. Sir Ken Robinson, for those that are not familiar, was very well known for his TED Talk on creativity. And sadly, he recently passed away, but he's a huge advocate for incorporating creativity into our classrooms because, as he says, it is now as important as literacy, and we should treat it with the same status. And so when I think of Book Creator, not only is it an opportunity for our students to be authors, but it also is an opportunity for them to be creative and to use multimedia tools and to build in interactive moments into their ebook so that it's not just a static piece of writing. So with that, we are going to jump into Book Creator. And again, we're going to go through the basics. And to get started, if you were doing this on your own, you would simply go to bookcreator.com. And I have a Google account, so I'm already logged into my Google, but I'll click on sign in, and it will prompt me, am I a student or am I a teacher? We'll talk a little more about the differences between the two, but you do want to sign in as a teacher because you want to create books for your students and have a library. So I'm going to click on teacher, and I'm going to sign in with my Google account. So again, we're going to go through some of the basics just to get your creativity flowing a little bit. And then at the end, we will look at some examples that are at an elementary, middle, and high school, and also look at some templates on how you can build off of the work of a template that somebody else or perhaps yourself have created. So when you first log into Book Creator, this is what it looks like. And so I have my library panel here of books that I've created and or imported. I can look at it in the view that you see, or in the upper right hand corner. If you prefer to look at it in a grid view, you can toggle between those two. So a couple things to point out before we jump into the book is over here on the left, I have my main menu that if I click on that, it shows you that I have some libraries. Now I have actually upgraded my account to the paid version. So I have one library that's private just to me, and then I have 3 additional libraries. If you're using the free version, you will only have the private and you will have 1 library. You will also have a limit of 40 books where I have a limit of 60 books. But nonetheless, as a teacher, you have a library collection that's private to you. So this is where you can build books to share with others. You could build templates. You could have a book that you want to copy into the library of a student. So as a teacher, you have this private collection. A student does not have that ability. A student can only join other people's libraries. So the library that I created for our students today is this one here called Kids Are Authors. So I'm going to click on that, and you see that it looks similar. Again, I could toggle it to the grid view. I only have a few books here, but I have a book here that the creative names of student 3, 1, and 2, but these are 3 different students who created a book from my class into this library. And if I click on this drop down arrow here, one thing that's nice that Book Creator does is it reminds us that our kids are all authors. And so it shows me here as the teacher, but it doesn't say students, it says authors. So these are the authors that are in my class right now. And so I have 3 that I've joined with email, 1 that I joined with a QR code. So if I toggle though, just real quickly to the student view. So at this point, I'm now looking at this from the lens of a student. I'm student 1 in this case. And in my library shelf right now, I only have 2 books. I have the book I created, I have the book a teacher shared with me. So I only see what I've authored or the teacher has shared with me. And then just to quickly point out in this main menu, you'll see that again, as a student, I do not have my own private library. I can only join other libraries. There is no limit to the number of libraries that I can join as a student. So again, just a small difference that I want to point out there, that students can join libraries, and within that library, they can author a book, but they cannot, they do not have their own private library. So I'm going to toggle back to my teacher view, and I'm going to go back to my private library here because I want to work inside of this alphabet book today. And so with that, we're going to jump in. And again, for those of you that might be listening that are at the middle or high school, I recognize that an ABC book is very elementary, but it was a very simple way just to showcase the different elements and basic concepts of Book Creator that you can apply, again, K-12 across any content area. You are only limited by your imagination. So I'm now within this single book, and I could come up here to Pages, which allows me to look at it in another grid view. So it almost looks like Google Slides at a quick glance. Each of the pages has a item here where I could copy the page, or if I wanted to move them into a different location. So in this case, if I were to create this letter A template page, rather than having to recreate a text box for every single one, I just simply came here, copied the page, and then changed the letters to match the next one in line. So I'm going to stick with letter A right now. And regardless of the page, you've got some options to add some different elements to it. Now, in this case, I'm in the comic template, and I'll go back and show that later. But I mentioned that because up here in the plus symbol is where we add elements to our page. Because I'm using the comic template, I'm going to have this comic choice in the middle. If you're working with kindergarten or first graders, the comic template might not be the place to start, only because it puts in more choices. And especially in the beginning, you may want to limit the choices so that your students have less clicks. So in the blank documents, you would only see media and shapes. So I'm going to come here to media. And the first thing I want to do here, because it's a letter A, is I want to add a picture. So I'm going to come up here to the import button, and it's going to take me to the Google search. I've got some other choices here, but I'm going to stick with Google search right now. And it is by default set up to be Google Safe Search. So if I'm looking for an ant and I see this little guy right here, I'm going to select and insert that into my page. I can click on it and resize it. Perhaps put that up there. Anything that I click on, any element or any media that I've added to my page, if I click on this inspector button, the inspector button is going to display options that are pertinent to the item that I've selected. So in this case, because I've selected an image, I'm only going to see options that would be relevant to an image. And so I don't have many choices here. I cannot crop. It is what it is. But as I were to add maybe additional layers to this page, I could move that image to the front or to the back. The other thing that I want to do here is I want to add some text. So I'm going to come up here to the plus button again, media, and I'm going to add some text. So as an author, the text that I'm including can be anything, of course. It might be that I want to add text about this particular ant. Maybe I'm writing a creative story. Maybe I'm explaining a process. Maybe I'm reflecting on something. So in this case, I'm going to simply say, the ever so prolific, this is an ant. And I have limited formatting options at this point. The other thing I want to mention is that within Book Creator, they have incorporated a lot of accessibility features that are really great for your students who need some additional help. It also is good for your English language learners. And so in this case, I do have up here, so I just typed this as an ant, but I'm going to click on this text to type, speech to text. Did you know that a single ant can carry 50 times its, oh, well, I just modeled the French there. It's got the French, I forgot to move that back. So it does have languages there for you. And let me put this back to, let me stop that and choose English. So it does, as you can see, capture the different languages, and it has 120 languages that are, we'll just choose that right now, that are built in there. So I'm going to stop that and try that again. Did you know that a single ant can carry 50 times its own body weight? There we go. So we showcased the translation component that's built in, but students again can type, or they can do speech to text, which might be helpful for some students. So I'm going to say done, and I can reposition that on here. Now that I've got this selected, if I go back up to my inspector button, now I'm going to see options here that are relevant to the text, whereas a moment ago, everything was relevant to the image. One thing that I want to point out here with the fonts is that when you think about accessibility again, they do have the Open Dyslexic font that is built in. So that's the font that weights it at the bottom of those letters to help your students that are dyslexic. So again, lots of accessibility features built into Book Creator. For letter B, we are going to take a look at the camera feature. So when we think about making things user-friendly and streamlined for our students, there are lots of apps that are out there, but one of the beautiful things about Book Creator is that it has the camera and the video recording built right into Book Creator. Kids do not need to go outside of Book Creator to bring those multimedia elements into their story. So I'm going to go back to the plus symbol, and this time I am going to use the camera. And I'm going to take a picture because this is letter B. So I've got a bear here. So I'm going to do that, take a picture. And that picture now goes right into my story. So I used a bear for B, but if you're thinking about stories that your students might be writing, this could be an artifact of something that they've created. It could be a piece of artwork. It could be, you know, I could hold up something. This is very simple. My last name is Bowling. But if I come back here to my camera, oops, there we go. So this is a very simple example, but maybe I had a piece of writing that I wanted to include. Again, an artifact. So Book Creator does a really great job of merging and marrying the written form with the digital form. So just thinking differently about the type of images that your students might incorporate into their story. They could take a selfie if this was an all about me book. So again, using that built-in camera, students do not need to go outside of Book Creator to use a different tool to do some app smashing. It's all built right into the software itself. So if
Yeah,
we,
I can't help but think how engaging this is for our students and how excited they'll be to put a little bit of themselves on these pages.
Exactly. And so again, the opportunity for our students to think creatively and to include that in there. And for some of our students, we certainly know paper to pencil is a great way for kids to capture their thinking, but this just offers so many different modalities for students to showcase their thinking, to write their story, and to be able to share their story. So yes, thanks, Michelle. So we're gonna hop over to letter C now. And again, as we just continue to look at the basic elements of what's embedded in this Book Creator. So I'm gonna go back up to the plus symbol, and I'm going back to camera, but rather than taking a picture this time, I'm going to record an audio, or I'm sorry, a video. So we're on letter C, so I've got some crayons, and get the countdown. So for the letter C, I have crayons, and I used to buy crayons for all of my students. And so one year I went to my crayons and noticed that all of the pink were gone. And lo and behold, my ever creative daughter had taken all of the pink crayons and created this beautiful piece of artwork that utilized every single green or pink crayon in my collection. And now I'll say use the video. So another way, again, because some students are more comfortable using audio and they might, again, want to explain a process. Maybe they're giving a reflection on something that they did in their class or experienced something in their story of 2020. So you see how easy it is to capture video. But again, when we think about accessibility, there are some things that are built into Book Creator that can be very helpful. So I captured the video, I've got it selected. I'm going to come up here now to the inspector button. And now I have some options here that are relevant to the video. And the one that I'm looking for is right here to add captions. I'm going to click on that. And I can either do it manually or automatically. I'm going to choose automatically. And depending on how long your video is, it might take a moment or two, but I don't need to stay on this page. I'm going to actually come back to this momentarily so that it gets a chance to render and populate my video with the captions. So we'll come back to this slide. So moving on to letter D. In this particular case, we are going to take a look at the audio feature. And so this might be, again, as with everything, a situation where I might want to add it as a reflection. It might be that I've included written text on this page and maybe I'm simply reading my own text so that I can tell my own story in print and also with audio. And so I'm going to come up here and I'm going to import a picture. So a moment ago, I added the ant via Google search. This time I'm going to bring one in from my desktop. So here is my dog. So we're renovating our office right now, and many times I think my dog thinks he owns it. So here he is conducting a webinar for me. And so I want to add some audio to this. And so I'm going to come up to my plus button, and this time under media, I'm going to record. So when we saw this record one before, this one was within the text that we were typing. So that was more of a speech to text. When we select it from this media element, it's going to give an audio recording. So I'm going to select record and start recording. My dog's name is Frankie, and sometimes I think Frankie forgets that he's a dog and that he is human as he sits here conducting a webinar for me. I can listen to it if I would like, and I'll simply use it. And so it will put on an icon that looks like an audio recording, and I can play it. My dog's name is Frankie. So again, I was able to record that audio without having to leave Book Creator and import a recording from another software. So making it very user-friendly and streamlined. Again, when we think about accessibility, one of the things that we can do here is I'm going to click on that, go back to my inspector button, and what I have now, again, are things that are relevant to this audio recording. If I click on the add transcript, again, I can choose manually or automatically. I'm going to go with automatically. So like the video, it'll take a moment. And when it's done rendering and processing, a little blue icon will show on that audio icon. So if you have a student that has some difficulty with hearing, they could click on that blue icon and read the transcript of what was recorded, which is really nice. The other thing that sometimes people do while that's still thinking is you can make that audio icon invisible and add a shape on top of that that might say something like click here or read here for directions. So it doesn't have to stay as that audio button. And here's my transcribed text. I'm going to say done. And then if you notice, there's that little blue icon there that is a visual that lets the reader know that they can click on the audio or they can click on that little blue button to get the text written to them. So just from a creative standpoint, like I said, so in this case, you might want to leave it like that, but you could click on that, come back up to the inspector button and say, make it invisible and leave it at that. Now, if you wanted students to see the audio and that transcript button, this would not make sense. So you would not do it for that, but let's say that we do. So what you might want to do is come over here to your shapes, and maybe I have a circle I want to put there. Maybe I'll come over here and I'm going to make it yellow. If it's a shape, I can simply double click in the middle of it, and maybe I just say something like, click here to listen to Frankie's story, or something like that. because maybe that audio button isn't grabbing their attention right away, and I want to do something to pull, to draw their eyes towards that audio. So if I layer that on top of it, right now it's on top, which isn't going to work because the audio is underneath it. So this is an example of where I might want to come back up here and move it to the back, which then puts my audio in the front. And if I drag it a little bit bigger, when the students click on that yellow circle, they're really clicking on the audio for whatever it is that you want them to listen to. So audio is an integral part of adding some of those multimedia elements into your story for kids. And as a teacher, it's a nice way too, if you're showing growth over time, if they're narrating their own story in the beginning of the year and you have them do it again in the middle of the year and at the end of the year, you can see a lot of that growth over time in their fluency, especially for those little and younger authors that we have. A couple more elements that I want to point out to you as we look at the letter E in our alphabet book. There are times that you might want to have students illustrate their own stories or draw diagrams or make some connections using some of those drawing tools. So going back up to, hopefully you're starting to see a pattern, going back up to that plus symbol under our media, we have the pen tool. And most of you are probably familiar with drawing tools. So they're your basic tools. I can come up here and choose a different color if I'd like. So I'm going to choose green, and I'm going to choose just the marker right now. And maybe I just want to draw a little bit of grass and come back up here to my brush. And maybe I'm going to draw a sun. And so you get the idea. Again, drawing tools are not, they're fun, but most of you are probably familiar with that. But the one tool that's a relatively new tool within Book Creator, going back to my pen here, is this auto draw. It's like the magic drawing tool. So if I click on that, actually I'm going to come over here and choose gray. So if I come over here now and draw, what I want to draw is an elephant. So if I just draw a circle right now, what you should see at the top here using artificial intelligence is it's populating it with images that it thinks I'm trying to draw. Well, I'm not trying to draw anything that I see there. I'm really trying to draw an elephant. So I'll keep drawing. Not yet. Maybe the magical trunk might, you can see that artist, I am not. So not quite yet. Let me see if I draw some feet here. And oh, there we go. So I like this elephant here. So I'm going to click on that. And it now replaces my hand drawing with this clip art. So for some of your kids, that might be helpful or fun. And again, a situation where they can narrate their story. And maybe I want to make this a glitter elephant. So once I say that I'm done, it actually layers that onto my page. You can see that it's all grouped together. It actually layers it on the page as a single image that I could resize and then go into some of those other tools that we've mentioned too, where they could write their story, whether it be through text or audio. Moving right along to letter F, we might want to include a map. So depending on the purpose of their writing, maybe they are in need of including a map to help tell their story. So coming back up here to the plus symbol, and where we've been before, this import button, but this time I'm going to choose map. And since we're on the letter F, I'm going to choose Fox Theater. And I could zoom in, I could zoom out, but whatever it looks like on my screen right now, when I click on select, is how it's going to be added to my page. So it actually added it as a screenshot. So wanted to mention that you can build in those maps and you have some flexibility with that too, again, depending on your purpose and the story that your students are trying to tell. The last thing I want to show within our alphabet book from a basic concept standpoint is that if you get to the point where you are Again, having your students embed various multimedia elements into the story that they want to tell. So perhaps what they're working on is nonfiction text. And in writing their narrative, including some images and things to build in that interactivity, maybe they want to also embed a virtual tour. And so one way to do that is I'm going to go to this Google site here that has all kinds of different virtual tools. And I'm going to say we're doing letter G, and I happen to be studying the Grand Canyon because I'm working on some nonfiction text here. So I do a search for Grand Canyon, and I could browse through all those, but for the sake of example, I will choose this one. So I have a virtual tour here, 3D, that I can look around, which is amazing. Whoa. And so when you're on a site like this, if you look for a button that looks like what you see here, almost like a greater than symbol, the share button, and I have the option here to copy some code. So I am going to copy that code, come back to my book, come back here to the plus symbol, and I'm going to import. So at this point, we've added the ant image, we've included a map, we've uploaded a picture of my dog. We could navigate to our Google Drive, and we could add a link or embed. In this case, I want to embed. So I'm just going to do a paste, and we'll add that to our book. So we've got that embedded in there. I've now got another interactive element that I could add some additional information to. So pretending that my book is done and complete, we've got a story and we're ready to share it to the world. So to do that, I have, first of all, my play button up here. And when I click on that, that shows you what it looks like for your end user. So again, earlier when we mentioned, why would I use this tool versus Google Doc or some other tool? Well, one of the main reasons is that it looks like a book. It feels like a book. So I can navigate between my pages. I could simply click on one and turn the page. So that feels like a real book to me. Everything that I've done is embedded and baked into each page. My audio here, this is where, remember, I had that audio icon that we made invisible, and then we layered an image on top of it because I wanted to draw the attention to the fact that if they click there, they're going to hear something. We've got our map, and again, it just brings it in as an image. But if I come over here to our virtual tour, if I click on that, I've now got this virtual tool baked right into my story. So lots of different ways to engage your students, lots of different ways to embrace creativity, lots of different ways to build in some interactive components, while the overarching purpose of all of this is for our kids to be authors, because we want them writing, and we want them writing in such a way that it can be shared with others to read and to enjoy. So if this was a story that we were 100% done with, and we wanted to share this perhaps with other classmates, perhaps we want to share it with parents and families, we now need to officially share it. So I'm going to come back up here again to this greater than symbol, this share button, and I need to make it go live. So right now it's just sitting in my private library. Nobody knows it exists but me and all of you. But if we want to share it out publicly, we have to actually publish it. So I'm going to click on this publish online. And as soon as I do that, yay, it's been published. So now if I read online, this here is the link that we would copy and share with others. And when I come back here now, you'll also see that I could share this directly to my Google Classroom. Maybe this was the book that you, the teacher, wrote for some information as well. So that's baked into there for you to share as well. The nice thing about that though is whether you share this via Google Classroom, if you copied this link and shared it with families via email, maybe you posted it on a website. The nice thing about that is that the end user needs zero software to be able to read that book. So they do not need an account. They don't need to be in a certain browser. As long as they're in a browser, they get that link. They'll see exactly what you're seeing here, and they can click through and navigate through those pages. So user-friendly for sure. And at any point you wanted to stop publishing it, if somebody were to click on that link, they would not be able to. They would get an error message. The other thing is this is just built right in as well. So the end user, go back to this one, the end user has a read to me function. Again, when we think about accessibility, it's baked right into the program. The other thing is this gear. So the end user has control over how that book is displayed for them. Do they want to see it side by side? Do they want words highlighted as it's read? Is the speed too slow? Is the speed too fast? So each individual reader of that text has the controls to modify it to suit their needs. I'm going to go back to my books now and take a look at how maybe as a teacher, I might use a template to get my students started, especially maybe for your younger students, and how would we share that with them? So when I've got my, it's gonna be hard to see because the Zoom button bar is right where I need to showcase some things. So one of the options, let me see if I can move that out of the way. Yep. Okay, so one of the things is if I wanted to bring in a book, I can come over here and I can import a book. And I'm gonna upload it from my computer. And I'll show you how you get these in a moment. So I've already got one downloaded and it's an EPUB file. So this is a template that somebody else created. This might be a good entryway for the beginning of the year, getting to know your students and introducing them to this tool that will allow them to become, to write stories. So I'm gonna say open, and that immediately goes into my library. And we'll say done. So this is just a template. And I'll click here to pages. So you can see we've just created a structure for students to populate it with some information, but they can add more pages. This is just a starting point. So if this was a template that I wanted students to use to get started, I need to get it out of my private library and into the classroom library. So I'm gonna come back over here to my library shelf and click back on this button here, and I'm gonna move it. And by moving it, I'm moving it out of my books and I'm gonna move it into my class library, Kids Are Authors. So you can see here in my grid, it's gone. It's not in my private library anymore. When I come over here to my Kids Are Authors, you can see here it is. If I click on that, and I'm thinking this is where I want my students to be, if this was the very, very first time, right now, I have it in this shared library, but I need my kids to come into this library. So I'm going to click on this invite code, and this would be the code that I would share with them. So if they were logging on for the very, very first time, they would choose student, where a moment ago we chose teacher. When they choose student, it will prompt them to type in a code to join a library, and this is what they would type in. So I'm going to go back to my student example, and I've already done that. So here is student one's grid. So if you remember a moment ago, she only had 2 books in there. She had the one that she created, and then she had the one that was already there. And now she has the one that her teacher has shared with her. And so now that it's in her library, this is actually a library that's shared with the whole class. So the class, assuming you're a standalone teacher with 1 class, your limit with the free version is 40 books. You can have every student create a book. So if I were student 1 right now, although I'm in here, I actually need to make a copy of this, because if you'll notice, it says play. If I click on this one, this says play. These are 2 books that my teacher shared with me. If I click on this one, you'll see the pencil. This was one that I created and I authored. If my teacher wants me to be able to write a book all about me, I need to actually make a copy of it because this is a template right now. So I'm going to come back to that same button and I'm going to copy the book because now I'm a student and I'm going to copy it into this library. And as soon as I do that now, you'll notice that I now have an edit button where I can now go in as a student, use this template and write my story. I'm going to flip back to the teacher, and in the teacher grid now, you'll see that I have a book here for student 1. If I go up here and I see my authors, I've only copied this into, student 1's the only one that's made a copy of it so far. But if I had a long list here of 30 students, let's just say, and they had all made a copy of this book and I wanted to focus on what did student 1 write, I could just click on her name and it would jump me right to her panel. So just a shortcut. If I go back to my library, how do we create that template? So I'm going to go back to our alphabet book here and play that. Go back to that share button, and I have an option here to download it as an ebook. So hypothetically, if this ABC book was a template, I could download it as an ebook. That would create that EPUB file that I could then share with my students or share it with other teachers. So in a nutshell, those are the basic elements of Book Creator. And hopefully you are getting a taste for possibilities because they are unlimited. It is cross-curricular, it is a blank slate. Again, it can be used K-12 for anything that your students can think of. It's a great way for them to write a variety of different texts and also to read the work of others as well. Embedded in this slide deck, there are examples of books that were created by an elementary, a middle, and a high school student. So each one of them has this yellow button to click there and you'll see an example. So here's an example of an elementary story that a young student wrote. So what she actually did was use another app, Puppet Pals, to create some animation for her story. And then if you click on each one.
There once was an owner called April, and she owned a twig.
And so she's actually narrating her own story. So this is a creative story. There are some different examples here. So this one, whoops, go back here. So this one here, the Freedom Middle School, this was a collaborative one. So this is one that a teacher must have had the paid version because this is a situation where each student narrated and included poetry around this topic of the Holocaust. And so you see there's the poem and then an artifact of something that they have drawn or illustrated. But what I thought was powerful about this is that on the very first page, they included music to set the tone for what this poetry book was going to be about. So as these different multimedia elements are added, it's not just adding the information, but thinking creatively about how do my words help to tell the story? How does the audio, how does the video help feed into the emotion of your stories? So lots of different possibilities. A high school example here is computer science. And what I wanted to point out in this story, again, this is high school. So you've got some screencasts created by the students. And if I click on any one of those, it's kind of small. But if I click on the little snowman buttons, I can make it full screen and I can see that as well. So there are some different templates here. We went through the All About Me template. And we've got some different templates here that could be used to get started. And then I have a link on this slide that will take you to a folder that looks like this. And so all of the template images that you just saw are here in this Google folder. So these were not created by me. These were created by a gentleman named Ben Stram, I say his, I don't think I'm saying his last name correctly, but I am not the creator of these. So he has graciously shared these so that you might have a starting point with your students. So you can use these as a starting point, but you can also create your own templates as well. Included in this slide deck too are some examples of how you as a teacher might use Book Creator to author your own story or your own professional learning, or to get some ideas of what other people have done. And so this book here, the Web Tools and App, and also this Digital Librarian Survival Toolkit are two books that were actually crowdsourced by library media specialists. So this was a collaborative effort that has all kinds of ideas and resources that you might use with your students. But it was collaboratively built through this crowdsourcing idea. And as you just look at it as a glance, you can see that this looks very different than the ABC book that we put together. If you're looking for some ideas, I'm going to go back to Book Creator here for a moment. And let's see, go back to ours here. So if I go back to my dashboard where we've spent some time, they have actually just updated this within the last week or two. They have a tab here that says Discover. And in here, they have all kinds of ideas that might trigger some ideas for you to use with your students. And so you've got examples here from kindergarten all the way up through high school. You've got some additional examples here. This Big Book Creator activity book was something that the Book Creator team created early in the pandemic that is basically just a book of activities for students to engage in. So a lot of ideas here. This Learn tab has all kinds of ideas and resources for you to how to, like if you're struggling. So lots of ideas there. And we just put some links in here that of some of the resources that might be helpful for you. But again, possibilities are limitless. So with that, I understand that there are some questions in the room.
Hi, Judy. One question was about the templates, and I think you've answered that one. Another question was whether or not students could get individual pages of a book, or if it would be more, if you can only send the entire book to the class and then maybe assign different pages.
Yes. So if you're sharing a book, let me get back to the dashboard here. So if this was a book, if you're sharing a book like we did in terms of a template, it isn't, you can't share just a single page. It is the whole book. So you would have to, in the free version, it's not real-time collaboration. So students would have to make a copy and then they would have their own version of that book. If there was the paid version, what you could do is you could turn on collaboration for that, and then it would be real-time collaboration where then you could say, all right, student 1, you take page 1, student 2, you take page 2. But that would not, you wouldn't be able to do that in the free version.
Another question was about accounts. Is it, should students have their own accounts, or is it better to have the teacher have an account and then have the students work on the books within the teacher's account?
Students will each need their own account. So when I've toggled over here to the student, this is a student account. So the first time that we logged in, just like with the teacher, she clicked on student, then logged in with her Google account. And the teacher then, because she shared a code, so this Kids Are Author, you could think of that as Mrs. Bowling's 5th grade class. So this would be my class with just my books in there of my students. So the kids, and this is where it becomes a process and how you want to do it, because the free version allows 40 books. So let's say that you as a teacher, I'm going to go back to the teacher side here. So if I'm in Kids Are Authors, I share this code with my students. Let's say I have 30 students. All 30 of my students are in this library shelf. So I might structure it and say, each student is going to have a single book, and each student is going to write in that one book all year long. So maybe it's a reflection journal. And each student will simply keep their own book and add to it as the year progresses. If you wanted to have students write a second book, there isn't enough space because you only get 40 books in that free version. So that's where you can get creative. So let's say, for example, I created this All About Me template. I have 30 kids. So I have 30 kids who've created and made a copy. I now have, right now I only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 books in my shelf. So if this was the free version, I would be able to have 34 additional books. So let's say that all 30 of my kids have written books, but I know that I'm going to want them to be writing another book somewhere in the year, and I have the free version. So what I could do is I could come in here and click on this book, and I could combine books. So I could come in here and say, I want to combine that one, that one. Let's just say I clicked on 30 All About Me stories. And at this point, I could say next, and maybe I'll say class All About Me books, and then create a book. Now, in this case, I didn't have a lot of examples, but if I look at my grid now, what I could do is move some of these out, and now I have a single book that is merged from the 2 books that I combined. So it's about just getting a little bit creative and maneuvering books in that free version.
Judy, there were a couple of other questions. One is, does everyone have to pay or just the teacher? And the other question was, can teachers make more than one library?
So the kids do not need to pay. So if I were, so I pay, it's $60 a year. So for that $60, it gives me the ability to do real-time collaboration. And I got these 2 additional libraries, and my limit went from 40 to 60. Even though this says I can create a new library, it's going to remind me that I can't, because I'm limited to what I've got right now. So students don't need to pay. It's just from the teacher. And then I don't, what was the second part of the question?
Sorry, then someone asked if teachers can make more than one library, but I think you just answered it. Depending on the, like for the $60 a year, you can make a total of 3 libraries beyond your My Books library. Is that correct?
Right. If you had a school or a district account, I think it's unlimited, but with the free version, you get your My Private, and then you get 1 library to share with your class.
I don't see any other questions, Judy. A lot of wonderful comments about how useful this will be for both students and teachers, especially in the upcoming year.
Well, we would love to see any creations that anybody does, either yourself or what the work of your students, but it's a wonderful tool that really is engaging. It really does build in that interactive component for your students so that they can be the authors that we know that they are, share it with a wide audience. And so just to wrap it up, we have some links in the slide deck that have resources for further help and support. And we would love if you would provide some feedback for this session. And I think, Michelle, is there any other, or Laura, any other items to share out before we wrap up?
We would just really like to thank everyone for coming. And even if you're joining us via the video in YouTube, if you could still take the time to fill out this little survey for us and let us know how we can better serve you. We'd love to know if this type of session meets your needs. Another thing in the what do you need next section of the survey, if you could tell us what time of the day might work well for you for webinars for this fall, we would appreciate any guidance you could give us in that as we look to keep bringing you content in a way that works for you. We thank you for coming, and we want to encourage you to reach out to us and connect via email or Twitter. We are here to support you however you might need. So feel free to reach out to any one of us or all of us. We're happy to help. And we are just so grateful that you joined us today.